All right, welcome back to another episode of Mediocre Painting with me, Wayne. We're here with Allison again
Ha!
because we like hanging out, and it's COVID times, and we're real lonely. So
We're lucky to tolerate each other.
we're lucky to tolerate each other. I know there's been some question about some audio stuff with our videos. That's because we're wearing masks because we're sitting in this room near each other, and we don't want to be dicks. So,
Speak for yourself. We're just horny for safety.
all right. Well, we're gonna do some stuff today a little bit different. Someday I'll get back to working on my old Gundam Macross model, but I wanted to. I actually had like 3 people on different occasions came in this week, asking about these D&D minis that have these clear parts on them and how I would paint them. And this is going to be like Wayne's quick and dirty method. There's no right or wrong way to do this. There's just an easy get the shit done way. And that's what we're going to do today for this fire elemental. This is the a Nolzur's Marvelous Miniature Fire Elemental from WizKids. We sell these in the shop. I don't know if we got them on our website yet, but at some point we will have them in the future. So as you can see, it's a little just chunk of clear plastic here. It's detailed out as a fire elemental standing on a base. So obviously you can paint this base whatever you want. Standard painting practices apply. But for the clear parts, some people are like, well, I want to paint it, but I don't want to lose that translucent element. And then they show this cool picture of the way they've done their fire elemental here.
I have also got this little lady who I'm working on who has some electricity coming out of her staff. I'm just going to try to speed paint her real quick so that we can kind of show you, because I feel like ever since we got this shipment in, like every other one of these new Nolzur's Marvelous Miniatures has some aspect of this clear plastic on it.
A long time ago, I had a clear parts model, and I forget what it was, and I accidentally used some inks on it to paint it, and it turned out really cool. So that's been my solution to painting clear parts, and I think that's what most people go to anymore, is just using your favorite ink brand. Every company, well, not every, but almost every paint company on the market makes some sort of an ink. And the difference between an ink and a wash, for those that don't know, is ink is way more concentrated than your wash. So, like the Games Workshop, the shades from Games Workshop would qualify more as a wash because they are not as highly pigmented. They don't stain as much as, say, the inks do. So GW doesn't actually make inks anymore. The closest you could get to ink style paints from GW now would be the contrast paints, because they're much closer to an ink in their consistency and their concentration. But Vallejo makes them. AK makes inks. They call them this is penetrating red ink. But they have an ink line as well. And so I found that these are the quickest way, easiest way to do clear parts. So without further ado, let's f around with this and see what we can come up with. Excuse me, mess around with this. So this is a fire elemental. And people argue all day about painting fire on miniatures, whether you want to paint it realistic or you want to paint it fantasy. And by that is a lot of people do the old school color wheel style painting, where you start with the dark and end with light highlights on the tips, like you would if you were painting any other model, where you start on the inside where it's darker, and then as it moves out where the light touches it, it gets lighter. That's not how fire works. Realistically painted, fire is lightest in its center, so it's you'd start in the center with white, and then move out to yellow, and then red, and then I think blue is the least hot color for fire. I don't know. So there's a couple different ways to paint your fire, and it's Magic World. I mean, we're talking about fire elemental here. So, I mean, you can paint it however the hell you want. But we're going to do the little bit like more realistic approach where we're going to have our lighter color on his innards, and then we'll do our darker color on his outards. I don't know if that's a word.
Now.
But it is now. So we're going to start out with some yellow ink. And I don't think I'm going to paint this whole model, but I am going to sit here and paint part of it. So their picture has like the yellow and the ridge in between on like all of the model, and like then they got the reds on the ridges. But we're going to say like he's got like kind of a core here that's going to be hotter than the rest of it. So we're just going to start out with the yellow here and just be generous with it. It's going to pool up, and you can move it around, because that's the great thing about an ink is it's mobile.
Well, and I've seen acrylic thinners for kind of like thinning out and extending your acrylics.
Yeah.
Do those work with the inks? Or...
They do. They will. If you actually add thinner to the ink, you'll make it into a wash. So it actually will lighten up its concentration.
I guess if you were getting into some heavy blending, you could.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So we're going to do this yellow just around this here, kind of the center of him. And then what we'll do is we'll come back later and do some orange and some red around the outside. Actually, we're probably just going to do red because I don't have an orange ink here today. And do his little eyes, do his peeps. And so you can already tell, like, we're getting the color, but we're also maintaining that kind of translucent, hollow feel. So he's not gonna like look like a solid chunk of plastic like you would if you were painting on an acrylic, like a fully pigmented paint over top. You know, I said I was only gonna do part of this on this yellow, but I'm really liking how this looks. So we're gonna do the whole thing, and then we're gonna play with the other blendy colors after that. All right, so through the magic of time, we fast forwarded about 20 minutes for this to dry some, because that's the thing about inks and a lot of your washes, they take time to dry. So be patient, otherwise you could have some mishaps while you're painting later if you try to paint on it too soon. I know we still got a couple of wet spots on here. You can see kind of where it's a little bit shinier on his claws there. And that's cool because if it blends in with our red to make a little bit more orange, that's what we want. That'll be kind of neat. So we're not being as super careful with this because it's just kind of for funsies model. But if you definitely don't want any bleed over, take your time between your ink washes. So we're going to use some of this AK penetrating red ink on here, and this will be the first time I've actually used this red ink. So we're going to find out how it works right here. So we're going to be a little bit more, try to be a little bit more selective with this red and how we put it on here. And try to keep it kind of to the higher areas of the model. And it's going to flow around a little bit, as inks are wont to do. But we're going to try to leave some of our yellow showing in some places. But you can see it's kind of, with that yellow base, it's kind of getting an orange tonality to it. This is way more red in person than it's showing up on this camera, because on this camera it just kind of looks like orange. But this is, I don't know if it's the lighting or the filter out and the way this lens filters, but this is definitely more red. And if you've got an orange wash or an orange ink or an orange contrast paint, you could probably really get some cool effects with that too. So we're just going to kind of do that on part of this, and then I'm going to track down some of those, and we'll do that for the other part of this model. See what effect we like a little better than the others. So we're kind of maintaining that yellowish look in the deeper recesses while he's getting redder here on the higher parts of the model. And then we'd let that dry. And then you'd want, you know, obviously we'd keep painting this whole model like this, but I'm going to grab some different colors so we can experiment with some different effects on here before we do the whole damn thing. So we're going to try some different things. So I went and grabbed some Griffhound Orange contrast paint from GW. Got to shake it up. And obviously you can paint your model to taste. You see this is kind of darkening down a little bit, and we still have, he's kind of a muddy orange red now. And I know I'm a heathen, I'm gonna paint right out of the pot with this stuff. And this is a contrast paint, so it's a little thicker. So we'll do that on his claws and see how that do. And that's that Griffhound Orange, it's a much darker orange on here. So that's almost a brown, is what it's looking like. I'm not really digging that for the elemental, so we're gonna probably stop right there. So, to be fair, it's designed to be painted over their base coats to really get that popping orange color. Over other paints, it's just kind of a muddy brownish orange. And it's definitely a muddy brownish orange on this dude's arm. So, if you want a muddy brown color over clear, Griffhound Orange. We'll try their yellow over this yellow first. You could probably do this over the clears too and get different effects, but I like starting with like the translucent yellow for a base for this fire thing, because then it definitely sets the tone for the model. Because even if you miss a space, like in here where we don't have it, where we intentionally are trying to leave that down in the gaps, it still has color to it. But your mileage may vary. Let's try some ioned in yellow. That's the cool thing about the inks, is you're still going to have that translucent base over it. Now that's a little nicer. The ioned in yellow is definitely a more orange pigment to it over this. So that's kind of giving our fire a little bit more of a richer tone. But it's definitely going to get you the fantasy fire where it's lighter at the edges, because it's definitely thin enough to just go down in those recesses and hang out, and it's leaving the top exposed, which is why I probably wouldn't just use this directly on the clear, because it's just going to flow off that clear, and you're going to have like clear tips of your fire and stuff here with orange in the recesses. Yeah, no, that's pretty neat on his arm over that yellow. That's definitely got a nice orange tone on there. It beats the shit out of that poop brown we got going on over here from the actual Griffhound Orange. So kind of like that tone. All right, we're gonna do some Blood Angels Red. Yes, I put mixing balls in all of my contrast paints because you want that pigment to be mixed up. AK Interactive stainless steel mixing balls. They're great. Well, that's definitely red. Because this is thick enough to where it'll sit on the ridges, because the consistencies of your contrast paints that are a little different throughout. You got to experiment around and see what you can do with them. Overall, no matter what you layer up on this, as long as you keep your layers pretty thin, you're still going to maintain that translucent depth that the clear plastic allows you to get with this, which is really the ultimate cool part, because you get that backlight effect of the light actually kind of passing through the model and just kind of bringing out those colors. Nothing that you paint can't be fixed. Even with these translucents, you can play with this color. You can mess it. You can like go over it with another ink to change the tonality of it, and try things. Because the worst that happens is you make a little bit of a mistake or it doesn't turn out, and you just kind of got to do it again. Yeah, this is not working. This is more coming out. It's kind of cool black, like char effect, but we're really losing. I think the Talisar blue is just too dark to really get that light blue effect. We'll probably do some more work with some clear miniatures in the future. when I have like the full range of my inks here that I can mess with, and I'm not just limited to the few that I actually had with me in my portable paint case. But yeah, like if you want, like they make water elementals and earth elementals and air elementals in this line, so you do the same thing with like sky blue inks, and they have brown inks you can do for the earth elementals. Like there's a lot of cool effects you can get with ink washes. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.